Let us leave the noise of the world behind and travel through time to a village drowning in snow, to search for warmth and live the stillness in the cold nights of the Middle Ages.
As for you, before we begin this deep and calm journey, leave your mark on our channel by hitting the subscribe and like buttons so you can easily find our content next time. And now, take a deep breath, close your eyes, lie down, and let sleep creep in.
Imagine that you are in a small wooden hut on the edge of a European village drowning in snow. The night is so long that time itself has frozen at the doors, and the fire whispers in the fireplace as if it is trying to survive. The air stings your nose, your breath comes out white, and the sounds of the wind hit the walls as if trying to storm the place. You wrap yourself in a heavy blanket that smells of straw and dampness, and think, how do people sleep here every winter without losing their minds? Your hand reaches towards the last ember to turn it over. You hear a crackle like a pulse of life inside this great silence. Outside, the village is submerged in snow, no light except from the windows of distant huts. And every house there carries its small story with the cold. Some slept curled up around their children, and others put the animals inside the room to share the warmth of their breath. Even sleep itself became a skill that needs planning and patience, as if it is a craft of survival crafts. Tonight, you are not a viewer, but one of those peasants. You feel the roughness of the cover and hear the purr of rain mixing with your breath. The wind blows on the village all night, whistling between the bare branches as if playing a melody that has no end. And you are lying on a pile of straw, feeling every breeze sneaking through the cracks of the wooden wall. The fireplace in the corner sends small sparks dancing in the dark, and the smell of smoke mixes with the smell of stale bread you left on the table. Everything is simple. Everything is raw, as if you are living inside an old painting painted by an artist who knows the meaning of cold more than he knows colors. Around you is a rough wool blanket, a piece of leather hanging on the door to block the wind, and a small window overlooking a whiteness that never ends. The night in the huts does not resemble the nights we know. Time there is slow like sleep itself, and the stillness is deep to the degree that you hear your breath as it collides with the cold air. You try to find a comfortable position on the straw, but every movement makes a sound, and every sound reminds you that you are still awake. In the far corner, a small goat curls around itself seeking warmth, and at your feet, a rural cat falls into intermittent sleep, sharing the steam rising from its nose with you. Animals were part of this nightly ritual, not guests but partners in survival. You try to close your eyes so the game of sounds begins again, the creaking of the door, the whistling of the wind, the rustling of the wool dress on your body, all transform into light music whispering to sleep to come closer. The sound of embers when they crumble reminds you that warmth is temporary and that you have to steal a nap before the flame goes out completely. Outside, snow falls silently, as if the sky hides its secrets in a white blanket, and the whole village breathes slowly like a huge creature sleeping in the lap of the cold. Time here is not measured by hours, but by the number of times you try to remember how warm you are before you forget everything and doze off. When the night begins to intensify and the cold invades the bones until it becomes like a creature wrapping around you, the real peasant's journey with sleep begins. It is not just a nap, but an adventure you plan for from the moment of sunset. In the morning, the peasant removes the grey cover and finds the heat hiding there like a small secret of the secrets of survival. On the other side of the hut, the family begins gathering covers and fabrics on top of each other. It does not matter if they are matching or beautiful. The important thing is to create enough layers between the body and the cold, the children in the middle, the adults around them, like a wall. This collective sleeping was not a coincidence, but a complete life system. Their breaths mix and their bodies make from the air a warmth that fills the place. Even small animals had a share. A goat or a dog or a small sheep sleeps at the feet to share the heat. They knew that fire might go out, but the breath of kinship does not cut off. On some nights when the snow intensifies outside and the earth turns into a mirror for the cold, the peasant sits near the fireplace contemplating the flame as if it is an old friend. He does not speak, only listens to the sound of wood crumbling bit by bit. Those sounds were like music for survival, making him feel that life is still moving despite this cosmic immobility. Then he extends his hand to a small cup with warm soup in it, no pleasure in it except that it gives the body another reason to resist. When he turns off the lamp, the night begins revealing its secrets. He hears the sound of rain on the wooden roof as if it is steps over the world, and sees the faint light emitted from the embers drawing shadows on the walls, resembling the old tales he used to hear in his childhood. Those shadows were sometimes scary, but deep in his soul they make him feel reassured. He knew that isolation in this cold is not an enemy, but a silent companion reminding him that he is still alive. And in the moment, he begins surrendering to sleep. He feels the world around him shrinking. The fire whispers, the wind calms down, and the hut turns into a wooden womb embracing him from the cruelty of the outside. Over the straw between heavy covers, he forgets how many days passed and how many will come. He does not think about tomorrow, for tomorrow in the village is not a promise, but a cold continuation of another day of patience. In old European villages, the life of peasants proceeded with precision, resembling the pulse of the earth they plant. No chaos in it nor luxury. With every dawn work begins anew. Men advance to the fields before the fog melts, carrying tools over shoulders as if they are an extension of the body, and the first crack in the soil opens with patient slowness. The land is the supreme judge, giving as much as it is watered and punishing when neglected, and every crop is a promise of another season of survival. Women rise with the first light to prepare bread, then gather water from distant wells, and begin weaving fabrics or sewing worn-out clothes that the family inherited generation after generation. Nothing in this life is left to chance, for every detail, no matter how small it seemed, carries the meaning of necessity. Winter is the real test for every village. When rivers freeze and trips are disrupted, every house becomes a small, isolated island. Therefore, they were preparing supplies weeks before the cold, drying fruits, salting meat, and storing wheat in tight wooden boxes lest dampness spoils it. Firewood is piled near the wall, and fireplaces are prepared to receive long months of cold that shows no mercy. And with all these preparations, fear remains standing. Will the supplies suffice until spring? And will the wooden roofs withstand the coming storms? Those questions were not asked aloud, but they lived in everyone's eyes, shining with every spark of fire. Work did not stop despite the storms, for agricultural life does not know vacations. The peasant was ploughing the land, even when the soil hardens, trying to move it with heavy worn tools, because stopping means hunger. Some of them were making their tools themselves from raw iron or wood, repairing them at evening under the light of the oil lamp. Women also worked without stopping. Repairing clothes and making covers and weaving wool were works no less important than agriculture itself. Every hand in the village had a role, and every time wasted means a shortage in bread or warmth. Houses were simple, built of wood and mud, and their roofs covered with straw to prevent rain leakage. Inside them, rooms are few, and furniture is rare, and everything performs a specific function. The fireplace is the heart of the house. Around it, everyone gathers at the end of the day. The only meal of the day is cooked on it, shoes are dried at it, and clothes are warmed before wearing them. Children sleep near it to share heat, and fathers stay up a little watching the embers before they sleep in their turn on layers of straw and wool covers. This arrangement was not a choice, but a system that preserved their lives through centuries. Relationships between peasants were based on mutual dependence. When a roof collapses because of snow, neighbors cooperate to fix it. And when one gets sick, female neighbors send him food and firewood. The isolation imposed by winter created between them a type of simple solidarity, silent but effective. In the evening, they gather in one of the huts, exchanging news of fields and tales of ancestors, laughing at old stories about kings they never saw, and sharing a cup of warm drink before everyone returns to his bed. In those few moments, they felt they are stronger than the cold, and that real warmth is created by closeness, not fire. This harsh life did not breed weakness in them, but made them the most patient people with the slow rhythm of the world. Food in the life of peasants was the balance of survival, no room in it for luxury or mistake. Every grain of wheat planted in summer was a silent promise of a winter that will not have mercy on anyone. And with the approach of the end of the season, old rituals that villagers inherited generation after generation begin. In the extended fields, everyone moves together like one cell to gather crops. Men cut spikes with sickles, and women gather them in small bundles transported on the backs of mules to warehouses. Little ones run after scattered spikes because every grain wasted counts. The harvest season was not a feast, but a precise battle against time, because if the rain preceded them, it ruined everything. In the evening, spikes are piled in storehouses made of wood and mud, raised from the ground so dampness does not spoil them, and closed with thick pieces of cloth that prevent the infiltration of insects. Wheat is separated from chaff by stones, then ground on the millstone slowly until it turns into coarse flour with a grey colour tending to yellow. From this flour, they make their bread, which is not baked daily, but once a week, and left to dry in the air until it turns into solid loaves that can stay for months. Bread was the backbone of every table, a symbol of dignity before being food. Beside it, peasants keep a stock of dried fruits like apples and pears, cut into slices and hung near the fire until they lose their water. Meat is salted with large quantities of rock salt and hung from the ceiling to dry, so it turns into a dark color resembling wood. Butter is stored inside clay vessels covered with ash, and cheese is made in summer specifically to age and become harder with winter. Every preserved piece told a story of fatigue and patience, because any negligence in storage means hunger before the passing of the season. Daily meals are simple and limited: lentil or barley soup, a piece of stale bread, and sometimes an onion or a small piece of cheese. In good days, a little meat is added if found. Everything is cooked in one pot over the fire without many spices, because spices were considered a luxury known only to the rich. Water is boiled before drinking, and salt is used with caution, as if it is white gold. As for feasts, the table changed a little. Fresh bread is baked and simple pies of wheat and honey are served. Children divide them with caution, as if they are tasting a rare happiness. Food was a life system regulating the entire society. The peasant knows that hunger does not wait for anyone, and that wheat is more important than gold, because gold is not eaten. In every village there was an old woman keeping storage amounts, knowing when the sack is opened and when closed, and when distributed to neighbors in case of need. That collective wisdom saved villages from famines countless times, and its value equaled any law or political doctrine in distant cities. However, food had its spiritual ritual also. When the harvest season begins, prayers are held in the fields. The first spikes are raised towards the sky as a kind of thanks. Then the first loaf is baked on the same day and offered to children as a symbol of blessing. Those small rituals made bread a sacred thing and made the table a theater for gratitude more than for eating food. In a harsh world defined by nature alone, eating was an act of survival and silence and thanks at the same time, connecting man to the earth as the root connects to the tree. The land was not theirs, but was a burden they plant to offer to others. Kings and feudal lords imposed a system making sweat not bear fruit except in their palaces. All that the peasant harvests with his hands is divided between him and the lord of the palace, but the scale never tips in his favor. Fields were irrigated by his effort, but yields are carried to royal storehouses, sealed with red wax and registered in the name of him who never planted them a day. As for the peasant, he returns to his hut with a crust of stale bread enough for one day, and sleeps on straw, knowing perfectly that he harvested from it the strength of his master, not his strength. Taxes were exhausting villages, paid in wheat or chickens or forced labor. Every man capable of walking was summoned sometimes to fix roads or build bridges used by nobles only. Some kings imposed on villagers to offer part of their crops, even in drought years, and he who is unable to pay his land is confiscated, or he is driven to work in royal stables. That cruelty was a continuous system, not stirring anger as much as planting permanent fear. In the eyes of peasants, justice was a word said in churches but does not enter fields. Laws were drafted to serve the strong, for even rain was calculated in their interest. If floods spoiled the crop, the peasant bears the loss alone, and if an abundant season came, taxes are raised to match the abundance of grace, as if the good itself is a crime. In some regions, the feudal lord owned the right of the first marriage, or imposes on the people of the village to offer personal gifts to him in every feast. Men work, and women spin wool for palaces, and children are used in gathering firewood or pulling carts, because poverty did not exempt anyone from duty, and despite cruelty, life did not stop. Villagers found their small ways of resistance not by revolution but by cohesion. They were hiding part of the crop under the ground, hiding eggs inside straw, and whispering about the nights in which bread is smuggled to hungry neighbors. Kings own the land, but they could not own the will of the peasants. That will is what kept them alive, despite hunger, and despite cold, and despite laws that break their backs. In cities, kings were celebrating with banquets on a table filled with what the countryside was deprived of: white bread, tender meat, aged wine. As for huts, mothers were convincing their sons that the smell of soup is enough for satiety. The contradiction between the two worlds became part of the collective memory. Palaces build their walls with stone, and villages build their patience with habit. And with the passing of years, injustice became normal, and deprivation a system, and contentment a kind of quiet survival that maintains the continuation of life despite everything. But inside every peasant, there was an unspoken idea, an idea passing in his eyes when he looks at his land in the morning, as if speaking to it in his secret. Someday we will plant for ourselves only. That idea alone was enough to complete his day, to carry his sickle and plant it in the earth anew. Not out of love for the system, but because hope in change became part of the instinct like breathing exactly. And thus, life continued between masters and slaves, between fields and palaces, and between the dream of freedom and the reality that shows no mercy. When you contemplate the life of peasants in the Middle Ages, you realize that their real strength was not in their tired bodies, but in their ability to withstand inside a reality that grants them nothing. In every morning, they go out to the fields under a grey sky, facing winds and mud, carrying primitive tools they made with their hands, and beginning a new day, as if they are writing history with a patience that is not seen. They did not stop working even in the harshest conditions, because stopping means hunger, and hunger in their time is a judgment that cannot be appealed. The land for them was an open book they read with sweat, and understand its language through effort alone. In winter, when trees dry and colors disappear, villages turn into small, isolated worlds. Bridges are cut, and paths freeze, and livestock is locked in barns. However, people do not retreat from their attempts to preserve life. Some men go out before dawn to inspect water drains, or to cut firewood from distant forests, while women remain in huts, cooking soup or patching torn clothes. Children run around the fire in innocent attempts for heating, and every house becomes a small unit of will. The night was the hardest test because the cold in it shows no mercy. Straw on the ground does not prevent dampness, and fire fades quickly no matter how much firewood increased. However, peasants had their small tricks for survival, burying embers under ash to reignite it in the morning, and covering windows with pieces of cloth, and closing cracks with mud and wet straw. Every simple detail meant extra hours of warmth, and every moment of sleep is considered a gain to be celebrated. But what made them continue was not warmth alone, but contentment. They did not complain because they did not know other than this form of life. In evening conversations they exchange jokes despite fatigue, and laugh when one of them tells a story about a king they heard about in markets, as if they are laughing at a world that does not concern them. They knew that happiness is not in riches, but in the ability to wake up the next day while they are still alive. Life in the countryside was not full of surprises, but it was full of meaning. Work is the rhythm that rules the days, and sleep is the truce that grants the body a chance to continue. And with every new season the village was changing a little. A child is born, a cow dies, a hut roof collapses and another is built. And with all this the land remains the only constant. Days rotate with it and repeat themselves without boredom. When you think of that era, you do not see misery only, but a kind of strange balance between man and nature. The peasant knew his limits and knew his value, lived between danger and calm, between deprivation and gratitude. Every day passing is a small battle against cold, against hunger, against fatigue. But it is also proof that man is not measured by what he owns, but by what he is able to endure. In this simple understanding was found the secret of survival that made those villages withstand for centuries and give us today stories about humans life did not do justice to, but they did not leave it a chance to break them.